it's Kathy, and this is my Grit Lit Week, one of my favorite type of books to read. And I have two books that I want to talk to you about briefly. The first one is The Shore by Sarah Taylor. This book is amazing. First, let me say that this is not a book of short stories, which a lot of people think that it is. It's actually a book of interconnecting stories that cover several generations of women, and it's told through staggering timelines of the past and a dystopian like future, I think 2143, that's actually imagined to be much like the past centuries. I loved this book. Loved. Mhm. It wasn't at all what I was expecting. I'm not even sure at this point what I was expecting because I got so much from this book. This book, it's about a legacy of women, and the levels of abuse in this book are astounding. The dysfunction of the families is eye-opening. This book gives you the darker side of life that's on the collection of the small islands off the coast of Virginia known as the Shore. Now, I have a blogger friend who lives in Matthews, Virginia, and Matthews is the setting for this first story in this book. And I never envisioned, based on talking with her almost daily for a while, I never envisioned that she could live in a town that contains such darkness and dysfunction. But then again, I grew up at the foot of the mountains in a small town, and I was surrounded by moonshiners, okay? So it can happen. I just never really pictured it that way. Now, while most of this story, not all of it, but most of it's told in first person of the women that we're talking about in that chapter, there is actually a story that it's told in second person, which gave kind of an eerie quality to it. It took me a minute to figure out who was talking or who was telling that particular story, but I love that Taylor actually chose the second point of view to tell it. It really added an extra layer to the events that happened in that story, and this book is so intense. There are many layers to it. If you actually take the time to peel each of them back one story at a time, you'll see the pattern, the characters, the connections, the darkness. It's almost like a curse on these women and the strength of these women. I was in awe of each of these women and their survival instincts, their growth into women that they didn't know they could become, good or bad, whether it be in the name of survival, vigilante that they became, their wants, so much more. Given the seedy men that plagued their lives, it was almost as if to escape the frying pan meant to jump blindly into the fire. Now, you'll feel everything in this book, from the sorrow to the anger. You'll feel conflict for wanting deep in your heart as a reader something for these women who really do want to better themselves. And they have opportunity to do that sometimes. They take the opportunity sometimes, but they always tend to just miss it or skip it. You know, this book will make you take a strong look at humanity. I think my favorite character from this book is Medora. She is present in the 1800s. She's half Shawnee, which makes her look less than a person in some people's eyes. And she's a woman who learned the art of using herbs for healing or other purposes. Yeah. She was probably the strongest of all the generations of women, and she took matters into her own hand multiple times. She actually had a cruel streak about her, but you know, it was in the name of survival. She did what she had to do to survive and to get out of a life that that she hated. You know, an abusive situation. She was probably the most determined woman, in my opinion, that I read about in this book. She truly wanted to rise above. She simply amazed me. This is a book that I highly recommend and say definitely stock this one on your shelves. This is actually a book that I can see myself wanting to revisit and reread in the future. Now, I have it in ebook, but I will certainly be putting a copy on my physical shelves because it's just that good. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about Above the Waterfall by Ron Rash. Now, when I see Appalachia, meth, sheriff, I immediately think grit lit, right? Not the case here. Okay. Now, this author, he's an award-winning author of numerous awards, in fact, for his writing. He's a professor at one of the Carolina universities. His prose is very poetic and lyrical, and his poetry fame actually precedes this book, but it's very evident in his setting, his character descriptions. The writing overall in this book is very much his poetry. Um, just stay with me for a second because I want to read you a sample. It's just a quick one, so hang in there. Just stick with me because I want you to get this, okay? A failed priest saved my soul. What would he be if here? Or what would he see if here? I ask. I pick up a Fraser fir cone, a hollowed likeness like a thimble, spring's green weight gone. The edges are strong keeled as viper scales, wings, seeds wedged in the slits. High in a white oak, a flicker searches for grubs. The bird's too blended to see at first, but then the red nape reveals and tree bark softens into feathers. The flicker's tap bursts and pauses, a thoughtful message typed. Where the trail skirts this creek, a strand of silver birch, then a gap where sun and water pool, on a granite outcrop, a five-line skink. Now, insert the scientific name, I guess, of the bird here. It's just the name, one that I couldn't pronounce, but it's here. Its throat fills and sags, but no other movement. A chameleon of stillness, indigo body coppered with stripes that chevron on the head. The back feet frog-cocked, the tail a bright blue fuse. I, too, feel the heart soak of sun and stone, the human in me unshackling. Okay. Now that was almost, not quite, an entire page describing a bird. Wordy? Yes, wordy is one way that I would describe this one. Note to self, read a sample first, okay? Read a sample. This is a library book, but I actually purchased this one on ebook and wish I had read the sample. Future goal, just saying. The cover is certainly that of Appalachian Mountains and their beauty, but where's the beef? But there just isn't any meat in the story. I wasn't captivated with Grit. I wasn't captivated at all. Basically, we have Les, a sheriff, who is in his 50s, early 50s, and he's about to retire. But he has one more crime to solve. Who's poisoning the trout stream? Yeah. He has the help of a park ranger, Becky. They have a relationship that neither of them can actually define. They sleep together, they get along well, they sort of connect with each other, but they really can't define their relationship. But Becky's there to help him solve the crime. And then there's the local guy, Gerald. Gerald versus the resort owner. That fight that's going on over the trout stream. First there's stealing and then there's poisoning. But I was bored. I was really bored. I expected more. I expected to be engrossed in a story, I guess, of the Godfather type of plot with twist. I wanted to feel those tremors of fear for what's happening or what might happen next. Since there was a crime, I wanted to speculate. There weren't a lot of characters to choose from on that point, and I really didn't get to speculate anything here. Okay, there is a meth bust. That was, should have been exciting, but it isn't anything gripping. It's so short and fast, I might have missed it if I'd been skimming, which I seriously thought of doing several times. But it's a pretty fast read at just over 200 pages, not worth skimming. The alternate point of views between Les and Becky, alternating every other chapter, actually became confusing. There wasn't really any indication that the viewpoint had shifted. You kind of just have to figure that one out on your own. Becky wasn't really developed as much. She wasn't developed as much as she was painted onto the page with prose. We do get Becky's past that she's struggling with, and it's certainly one that I should have connected with, but I just wasn't feeling it. The way it was written, I never really got a feel for any of the characters. There are plenty of other gritlets out there that captivate me and keep me motivated, but this just isn't one of them. I say sidestep this one, just walk on by. That, skip it. Okay. That's it for this edition of Stock It, Sponge It, Sidestep It. Until next time, happy reading.